Everybody, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, the platform that we normally do the show on, DawgNation.com. The DawgNation app is just not working. It's down right now, so if you normally watch on DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app, we're going to try to send a tweet out via the DawgNation account just to give everybody a heads up on this. But if you normally watch via DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app, thanks for checking out one of the other platforms. We're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter and Twitch. So we got a lot of other platforms you can watch the show on. But for now, we're just down across the board there on DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app. Certainly apologize for that, but thankful to have all these other platforms as well, including podcast and radio coming up. A lot of fun on the show today, too. We'll do kind of a brief first and 15 here for the entirety of the video audience. They're able to tune in and then jump on the show after that. But a fun show coming up. A little bit more chatter out there about Jordan Davis and a possible Heisman candidacy. I think it's really amazing how much this has grown here over the course of the last couple of weeks. And obviously, you got to do a lot more to get it across the finish line and actually make it happen. I won't dispute that. But the fact that it's even as robust as it is right now, I think says something pretty cool. We'll talk about that. There's a little bit of chatter out there involving a couple of major recruits and potential UGA connections. We will talk about that. That's always a fun topic to get to, especially when it's the kind of thing that's viewed as bad news for the lousy, stinking Gators. That makes it even better, so we'll have some fun with that. And I want to revisit something that Alabama coach Nick Saban once said, that he just thought he was so smart for saying. He just thought that he was getting over on Kirby smart by saying this. And the reason why we know that's true is because he said it so many different times. So we're going to get into that today. Exactly revisiting something that Saban once said that he had learned and discovered kind of late in his career as a coach that he was just so sure was true. But now in retrospect, you're left to wonder, well, was it really as true as maybe Saban thought it was based on how the sport is playing out right now, including how things are playing out for the Georgia Bulldogs? So we'll talk about that here today as well. Connor Riley's going to stop by, Kroger Fresh Take with him. Obviously, Connor was in Athens yesterday. A lot of players and coaches. Obviously, Coach Kirby Smart talking about the upcoming game against Tennessee. Told you yesterday, this is not coach speak for me. This is not like Mann or Larry Munson coming out. I do truly believe that Saturday kind of feels like a test. I watched a good bit of that Tennessee game against Kentucky on Saturday, and I saw Kentucky do a lot of things. This wasn't exactly the bad Will Levis game. We've had a lot of bad Will Levis games as of late, the Kentucky quarterback. On Saturday, this wasn't really one of those. Kentucky actually played pretty well offensively. A lot of the things that Kentucky did were things that Georgia, you think, would also try to do on Saturday. Be good on third down, move the football, control the clock. They had the football for more than 45 minutes during the game. They were good in the red zone, scoring a lot of points on, I think they scored on all 5 of their trips into the red zone. Yet they still lost, and the win expectancy kind of favored them to lose almost the entire time because of just how explosive Tennessee was when it had the ball. So I think that sets up a scenario on Saturday where if you're Georgia going into Neyland Stadium, I do think you need to be a little bit careful. Kirby Smart has said that now a couple of times, and I think it's a warning worth heeding if you are a Georgia fan. So we'll do some of that with you here on the program today. So a lot to get into. Jordan Davis Heisman, some recruiting stuff. We'll kind of mock Nick Saban for something he thought was true that may be less true now than it once was. We'll just sort of do it all as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I've said all along that I don't really have any interest in getting any credit for the hashtag JD to NYC. This is not something that we've done to draw attention to DawgNation Daily. This is something that we've done to draw attention to Jordan Davis. So I still feel the same way that I have before. As all of this continues to grow and play out, this is not one of those things where, I want to be part of the story here. I want Davis himself to be part of the story. But admittedly, because I do believe in the cause so much, if you will, I do think that Davis deserves this attention as a representative for all that has gone on with Georgia this year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It is pretty remarkable how all this has played out. And, this is going to sound immodest and self-serving, and I apologize. But when we first started pushing the hashtag JD to NYC, we want Jordan Davis to New York City as a Heisman finalist. We want him a part of that discussion. I remember the mockery we got for doing that. BA, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard. BA, that's got no chance of ever happening. BA this, BA that. And we were undaunted. We pushed ahead with it, and we watched the snowball slowly start to roll, to the point that a couple of weeks ago, Davis finally showed up on BetUS as a Heisman candidate that you could actually bet on to win the Heisman Trophy. And some of you were like, well, yeah, but he's like 100-something to 1. He's down there with guys that we know are going to win the Heisman Trophy. And what I said at the time was, listen, this is a process. It's got to play out slowly over the course of time here, and you just got to give it time to progress. Then he went from like 100 to 1 to like 80 to 1, and the snowball kind of rolls here and on and on. You've seen the Paul Feinbaums and the Kirk Herbstreits and the Reese Davises and all the big voices around college football. They've all kind of had their side on this. The CBS guys have kind of gotten involved a little bit in this too. There was obviously the great pre-game video piece that aired before the Florida game a couple of weeks ago. Some of the writers on the CBS side have kind of gotten in on this, and all of a sudden that snowball kind of keeps rolling here just a little bit. And in fact, speaking of a completely different network beyond ESPN and CBS, I thought this was really interesting, and a lot of you have sent this to me. We even had some fun with this yesterday related to some of the Golden Shoe stuff. That Fox Sports the other day kind of put out their tweet of Heisman contenders, and we've gone now from not 100 different guys, not 80 different guys. There are 6 faces on this graphic. If you're watching on video, you see it. Fox College Football says, with 10 weeks in the books, who's your current Heisman frontrunner? And you see, running back Michigan State, obviously quarterbacks from Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss. And then right there, top left corner, Jordan Davis, big number 99, now just one of 6 faces who's getting Heisman Trophy love and Heisman Trophy chatter from a big brand like Fox. Fox actually produces the most watched game in the noon window each and every week. You think of ESPN kind of owning and controlling college football, but the fact is, there are millions of people who think of Fox first when they think of college football, and this big brand that is Fox is touting Jordan Davis for the Heisman Trophy among the other well-known quarterbacks and one running back. I got to tell you, to the extent this has grown in stature over the course of time, I find that to really be pretty cool. And it was also cool yesterday in Athens when the media stuff was going on, Kirby Smart, Georgia players, to continue to see Davis get the kind of chatter that he's getting. And here's where I'll be very honest for a moment. That for as much as we've seen the Davis stuff grow to the point where, okay, he's gone from being like one of 100 guys in consideration, and now, he's maybe, at least according to Fox here, one of 6 guys in consideration. It is still going to take a lot more than this to get him over the top. If this is going to really happen, if he's really going to be in NYC for that ceremony coming up in December, you got to have that another moment where everyone's reminded of just how significant of a role Davis has played for Georgia this year, which is one of the things that also came up yesterday. The fact that he and Jalen Carter have kind of come onto the field in goal line situations for Georgia. They provide that big extra beef. You can run behind him. You can score touchdowns. Certainly Zamir White did that this past Saturday. That's always a fun thing to see. But how about the idea of using him more than just a blocker? How about doing like what Jalen Carter did a year ago, getting a chance to catch a touchdown? Ironically, that happened against Tennessee, the opponent that Georgia's going to play on Saturday. But if you're wanting Davis to take that next step in this Heisman conversation, giving him what we've commonly thought of as the Heisman moment, a chance to, have the kick return for a touchdown, or have the, a lot of times with quarterbacks, you kind of throw the ball back to them. I remember when Gino Torretta was quarterback at Miami, this is going back years ago, they had a play designed where he was going to catch the football. This is like way pre-Philly special. It was kind of unusual for quarterbacks to catch the football back then, but they were going to design this play, and Torretta was going to get a chance to catch it. The name of the play they ran was called Heisman. The understanding being that you got to give a unique highlight to a guy that you want to see get over the hump in a Heisman conversation. The concept of the Heisman moment has existed for a long time, and so maybe Davis on offense getting a chance to catch a football or get a carry, almost like what William the Refrigerator Perry would have done back in Super Bowl 20 in 1985. All these things kind of come to mind here for Davis getting a chance to do that, and that's why I thought it was really cool yesterday. Georgia tight end John Fitzpatrick was talking about the big goal line situations where Carter and Davis comes in, the way the fans noticed that, but also the way that, admittedly, a guy like Davis, who's been a selfless team first player, would obviously love to get the football. He'd love to get that touch on offense because football players always want to touch the football. That's just a commonality that exists throughout all the annals of the sport, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So this is really good. Now, the audio quality probably is not perfect on this, but hopefully you can still make it out. John Fitzpatrick on the role that Jordan Davis potentially plays on the offensive side for UGA. Good stuff from Fitz here.
Kind of hear it in the crowd when they run out there. You hear the uproar when they see 99 and V8. You hear a loud crowd, and it's exciting. They're huge dudes, and they're gonna roll people up. So.
I was wondering if you ever heard any one of those guys kind of lobby for a carrier to him before the year's out.
They have.
Would y'all like to see that?
They have, and I'd love to see it. I know Jordan has mentioned it ever since Jalen got that touchdown last year. I think it was against Tennessee.
Yeah.
So Jordan has mentioned it before. He's like, where's my touches? So I guess we'll have to see.
Like I said, there's a little bit of background noise there that may have been hard to hear all the way around, but hopefully you could pick that out. John Fitzpatrick saying, yes, the players certainly noticed the reaction from the crowd when the big guys come running in on offense, Jordan Davis included. And you hear Fitzpatrick acknowledge at the end of that clip that, yeah, Davis is asked, hey, when's my touch going to come? When am I going to get a chance to touch the football? And listen, I think that's all in good fun. I think it's great that Davis wants his chance to do that. Who wouldn't want to touch the football if you've got a chance to do just that? And it kind of speaks to, I think, the way in which Davis symbolizes the way in which this team has worked all season long, but also the fun they seem to have about playing together with each other. This is a team that, I mean, you always run the risk of maybe misinterpreting things when you're on the outside looking in on a program, but the best I can tell, this seems to be a team that's really clicking from a chemistry standpoint. This seems to be a team that's really aware of what its goals are and aware of the fact that everyone moving in the same direction is probably the best way that you get a chance to accomplish those goals before the season's done. Davis just stands as such a strong avatar for all of that. And once again yesterday, and this is by my count maybe the third time I believe that Smart's been asked about this, so it's a hot topic in media right now. Smart was asked again yesterday of, given what the stated criteria is for winning a Heisman Trophy, does that mean that someone like Jordan Davis really, truly should, even this late in the season, this moving from being kind of a fun thing we did to honor a guy who's playing well to now being the kind of real thing that could actually happen? Once again, you're going to notice this. We've said this before when Smart's been asked this question. The dog that doesn't bark here, the thing that Kirby Smart doesn't say is, we're not worried about Heisman trophies. We're not worried about that. Jordan Davis is not the least bit concerned with a Heisman trophy, or we on behalf of him are not the least bit concerned with that. Kirby Smart sidesteps the chance to go full-on campaign mode here and tout Davis for the Heisman, but he doesn't certainly apologize for anybody, maybe like ourselves around here, who want to tout Davis for this award. And Kirby Smart, once again yesterday during his press conference leading the game against Tennessee, once again argued very effectively for exactly why JD has been so valuable for UGA here this season. So this is Kirby once again being asked about the possibility that Jordan Davis could win the Heisman Trophy. I liked Kirby's answer. Take a listen.
I love Jordan. What he's done for our defense is incredible. I don't think you can measure in the statistics what he's done for our defense. But I'm no analyst to be deciding who gets to go for the Heisman and who's up for it. I think that's, the media and the talking heads and everybody that gets to be a part of that. They've kind of controlled the narrative there. For me, it's about our team and our team playing well. And Jordan's been a tremendous part of that, and he's been a bigger bonus to our defense from a confidence standpoint and a run stopping standpoint than probably any other measurable stat that we have there defensively.
So when you hear Kirby Smart say there's a value that Davis brings to this table from what we're able to do against the run that's not truly measured by the stat sheet, and obviously there is a degree to which stats do tell that story of what happens when Davis isn't on the field compared to when he is, and that certainly goes part of the way of telling the story, but as Smart kind of alludes to, there is an intangible quality here that just simply can't be measured. And I think that's true. And I think it's really fun to see where this is right now. As I said before, as someone who's really pushed to get this over the hump, admittedly, you need a little bit more help here. You need that Heisman moment, that cool highlight that helps tell the story that words and data can only do so far and so much to explain. The big moment could certainly help that case. And by the way, against Tennessee on Saturday, 3:30 on CBS, that's a relatively high-profile spot there, and it is a chance for Georgia to maybe get that moment for Davis. That'd be a fun thing to be able to see. Now, with that said, let me shift gears completely here And let me do a different topic. And this kind of revisits something we talked about a little bit late last week, but I still have this on my mind. And I want to go back in time here. Let's go back to March. And let's look at Alabama coach Nick Saban for a moment. Now, what you're about to hear from Saban is the kind of thing that Saban has said over and over and over again. TV interviews, ESPN profiles, so many times Saban has just been so proud of himself for how willing to change in the winter of his career he's turned out to be. That he was obviously set in his ways and kind of cut from a certain kind of cloth and wanted football played a certain way. But boy, whether it was Lane Kiffin's metamorphosis that was beginning in 2014 or whatever else, that Nick Saban just came to see the light and came to value the current modern age of football that we're in right now, where you're throwing every down and you're trying to score 100 points, and all of a sudden defense and running the ball doesn't matter quite as much as it once did. And boy, it's an entirely opposite perspective than you would have once expected Nick Saban to have. But Saban was just so proud of how much he's changed. And let's go back to March and hear Saban patting himself on the back for his ability to learn some new tricks at kind of an old age. This is Alabama coach Nick Saban.
The game is different now. People score fast. I grew up with the idea that you play good defense, you run the ball, you control vertical field position on special teams, and you're going to win. Whoever rushes the ball the most for the most yards is going to win the game. You're not going to win anything now doing that. Because the way the spread is, the way the rules are to run RPOs, the way the rules are that you can block downfield and throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage. Those rules have changed college football. And no huddle fastball has changed college football. So I changed my philosophy about 5 or 6 years ago. It was more than that. When Lane came here, we said we got to outscore him.
So that's Nick Saban, just so proud of himself. Oh, he let Lane Kiffin change everything but the Alabama program, and they've been better for it all these years. And obviously last year stands as potentially evidence of that. Alabama won the national championship, averaging about 50 points per game. But let's think about something here for a moment, and you're kidding yourself if you don't think that Nick Saban has also been thinking about this a lot as of late. Let's look at the last 3 years of college football. These 3 years would seem to be evidence to support everything that Nick Saban was just discussing. Because for as much no-huddle fastball as Alabama put on display a year ago, LSU, the national champion the year before that in 2019, they did just as much of that, if not more. Even Clemson, who won the national championship in 2018, not quite as explosive as LSU would be the following year and Alabama would be the year after that, but they're still scoring 40-something points per game and obviously using a high-powered offense to beat Alabama in that season's national championship game. That the last 3 years of this sport would seem to stand as evidence to support the argument for change that Nick Saban just made. But let's also revisit this for a second. What has happened to those programs since then? Let's start with Clemson. Clemson won the national championship in 2018, scoring 40-something points per game. Were a major contender to win that national championship the following 2 years after that. But where are they right now? Nowhere to be found. They're not a championship contender. They're barely even an ACC title contender. That when you have the great quarterback, when you have Trevor Lawrence, a guy like that, or Deshaun Watson before him, when you've got quarterbacks like that, yeah, you can fly up and down the field scoring 40-something points per game. But once that guy leaves, and great quarterbacks always do, once that guy leaves, all of a sudden it becomes much more difficult to replicate the success that you once enjoyed. And if that's true for Clemson, isn't that even more true for LSU? That LSU was, in 2019, probably the most explosive offense I had ever seen. And I'm still going to rank LSU in 2019 over Alabama a year ago because LSU had to do it in hostile road environments, something that did not happen during the pandemic year. But the success that LSU enjoyed in 2019 was for the most part self-contained. It literally existed in a fishbowl. And there's almost nothing in the current state of LSU to remind you of what happened for this program there in 2019. That you can have the great success and you can bring in the sharp offensive mind to create that. That's what Joe Brady did as passing game coordinator for the Tigers in 2019. But when you outsource that and you depend so much on your success on some super sharp, brilliant offensive mind, the fact of the matter is you're at the mercy of that guy leaving. And those guys will always leave. They will always go somewhere else. They are hot commodities. They are here today. They are gone tomorrow. Joe Brady's with the Carolina Panthers now. He had no intention of sticking around LSU 1 minute longer than he had to before he got more money, bigger job, a chance to maybe one day be an NFL head coach, and that's just kind of the way that it goes. Same thing for Alabama a year ago. Okay, you've got this great offense. You're making more out of guys like Mac Jones and Devontae Smith than anybody ever thought was possible. But the guy who was responsible for all that success, Steve Sarkisian, you can't keep him. He's going to go and become Texas head coach. And you'll say, well, we'll just replace him. We'll replace him with Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien was the head coach of the Houston Texans. How's that working out right now? In comparison to Alabama's previous offensive success, can anybody say that Bill O'Brien belongs in the same sentence at all with what Steve Sarkisian once did for that program? So here's what I'm starting to wonder. And as I said before, don't think that Nick Saban hasn't been thinking about this. That Saban's idea of, oh, man, the sport's changing. You got to change with the times. You got to be the explosive offense. You got to be able to do that. Well, for some teams, they've been able to achieve success by making these radical changes. But in the case of LSU, currently Clemson, maybe even Alabama, although we're still in the midst of trying to find all that out, that the big, wild changes that led to immediate, aggressive success, somehow that ended up being fairly short-lived, and that ended up being the kind of thing that was not sustainable over the long haul. And for Kirby Smart, who admittedly is kind of an outlier among minds of the top head coaches who are trying to win a national championship, Smart has been the guy most content to pursue his championship in a way that runs counter to what most of the rest of college football is doing. Even teams who've fallen short in recent years, like Oklahoma and Ohio State, they are clearly with the idea of the offensive revolution, something that Kirby Smart has only been slow to embrace. But when you look at the state of the sport right now, not just Georgia's success, but other would-be title contenders, Oregon's still a part of that conversation. They are clearly not one of these teams trying to score 100 points per game. Michigan State just lost on Saturday, but they're still going to be ranked, among the top contenders tonight. Once again, a team quite content to be something less than 100 miles an hour, 100 points per game. Look at the SEC right now. For all of the chatter that teams like Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss have gotten, and Dan Mullen, Florida once got, look at who's truly having some success right now. Obviously, it's Georgia doing things the way they are. Texas A&M is also one of these teams that's content to play defense, content to run the football, content to be more physical than finesse. I would say to the extent that Auburn's had success here under first-year coach Brian Harsin, obviously a lot of what Mike Bobo is doing at this stage of his career also fits a little bit more into the A&M Georgia style than it does the Ole Miss, spread them around all over the field style. That the change that Nick Saban says that he has observed in the sport and the change that Nick Saban underwent that he is so proud of, all of a sudden you wonder if the sport was really changing quite as fast as Nick Saban thought it was. Like a lot of cycles and a lot of trends, eventually they reverse themselves and they start going the other direction. So here's where I'm leading to with all of this. Let's say that Georgia really does beat Alabama in the SEC championship game come December. And let's say that it's the kind of win for Georgia that knocks Alabama out of the college football playoff conversation. Obviously, that'd be really painful for Nick Saban because losses always are. But understand this. That kind of loss in this kind of year would even be more painful because Nick Saban outsourced his success to other guys, to Lane Kiffin and Brian Dable and Steve Sarkisian. Nick Saban gave responsibility for his program in large measure over to somebody else. And those offensive minds are always going to be here today, gone tomorrow. That there is less of Nick Saban's DNA in the Alabama program than ever before. He has traded all of that, sold his soul, if you will, to bring in what he thought he had to have. And then to see his former protege, Kirby Smart, building a program the way that Nick Saban would have preferred to build a program with elite recruits and playing good defense and hopefully rushing the football and things along those lines. The kind of team that Kirby Smart has put together, if this is the kind of team that sends Alabama home come December, you better believe that'll be extra painful for Nick Saban because not only will he have to deal with himself as, once again, something less than a champion, he'll also have to realize that all of the change that he thought he saw in college football, maybe things hadn't changed quite as much as he thought they had. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and we're glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. I know we had a little bit of a platform issue with DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app a little earlier. My understanding is we are now available on all those platforms once again, so if you tuned in 9:45 this morning for the First and 15, I know we missed you on that, but we are thankful to be able to deliver this show to you right now, and we appreciate you being with us however you're getting to us. Some of you watch it on video, you listen on the podcast, you listen on the radio at noon. on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. However you get to us, just really, really appreciate it. It's a huge privilege for us to be able to narrate the experience of a special Georgia season, which you hope continues through December into January and all the way through. And obviously, we appreciate our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making it all possible. You know, ESOG, the one to turn to for your foundation, your waterproofing issues. One of the things I've heard from so many people throughout the fall is, man, it has been so rainy in the state of Georgia, in the Atlanta area where I live, and that's true. And when you have seen all that rain that's been coming for, going back months, obviously, that can bring some anxiety for a homeowner because you see that water creeping into your house in some cases. It sneaks into a crawl space, or you notice it in your garage. There are those wet spots in your basement. You're like, oh, gosh, this is the sign of a potentially even bigger problem. And that's where my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia can step in. Also, when you see those cracks in your wall, that can also be evidence of a foundation issue, which is another reason to keep ESOG on your mind. They're a solutions-based company. That means they are there to really step up and solve your problem when it comes to your foundation, your waterproofing issues. The number to dial to get in touch with them could not be easy to remember. Simply dial 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. They have 2 full-time engineers on staff. That means they've got smart folks doing great work for you. They're proud partners of UGA, and it's always great to support those companies that support the dogs. And, of course, they've been longtime friends of ours here on DawgNation Daily as well. So we are really appreciative of that. And I personally am very thankful for all of you that continue to support those that help us stay on the air and do this show each and every day. That is a really awesome thing. So give them a call, 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now, and that'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. All right, we've got Connor Riley coming up in just a moment. We'll do a Kroger Fresh Take with Connor, and that'll be a lot of fun here, diving into a lot happening around the Georgia program, both in terms of a look ahead to Tennessee, and then maybe a little bit of a look ahead even beyond that. What's it really going to take to get Georgia where it wants to be come December, January, and a shot at a real championship here. We'll talk to Connor Riley more about that coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I do want to go around the Doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at Georgia's own credit union. And then very briefly, let's spend some time talking some recruiting stuff here because big news on the horizon involving a Georgia target of note. Now, admittedly, as I said before, I've admitted this in the past. I try to be classy when possible. That's not always the easiest thing for me, especially when it comes to the lousy, stinking Gators when I have a chance to mock them for whatever reason. That's something I'm going to do. And so while, we try to, keep it classy around here and celebrate good things for UGA, when it is a good thing for UGA that's also potentially a bad thing for Florida, admittedly, we think that's a double win. And so it is certainly of interest to us that with all the chatter that's gone on in the last couple of weeks about what Georgia is doing from a recruiting standpoint, what Dan Mullen at Florida is not doing from a recruiting standpoint, the fact that this entire ordeal could be punctuated this week with potentially a commit to UGA from a former Florida commit, well, we're obviously going to love that. Now, it's no given, no guarantee what the 4-star defensive back Julian Humphrey does. But let me just show you this on social media here for a moment. So Humphrey has said that he's getting ready to make his announcement. He's committing Friday at his school there at noon, and he hopes to see everybody there for that. You better believe there'll be a lot of attention paid, a lot of folks tuning in for what goes down there with Julian Humphrey. And no question about it, this is a big potential get for whoever gets Humphrey. Obviously, Georgia feeling pretty good about this. I'll invite you to go back and check Jeff Sintel going back to last Friday. We had him here on DawgNation Daily just discussing the fact that, Georgia has seemingly been kind of an ever-present factor in the Humphrey recruiting, even going back to the time that he was a Florida commit. So obviously a lot to pay attention to and a lot to certainly be intrigued by when it comes to Humphrey and what he's going to announce on Friday. And he's been teasing this announcement for a while, setting the stage for this, building anticipation and expectation. And so Humphrey's clearly having a good time with his recruitment right now. And Georgia fans will certainly be having a good time if Humphrey steps up and picks the Dogs come Friday. There's also this from Humphrey on Twitter there, too, that once again gets some attention because Humphrey's not the only recent high-profile decommit from Florida. You'll also think about the 4-star linebacker Shamar James, and Humphrey teasing that he and Shamar James will soon be teammates. Now, listen, I don't have to tell you, you already know this. A lot of this kind of chatter on social media ends up being just something that's done in fun or the kind of thing that players believe for the moment, but eventually it kind of fizzles. The sort of package deal type stuff, for the most part, doesn't come to fruition as much as sometimes players think it might. But when a guy like Humphrey says that, it's going to get our attention because the idea that Georgia could swoop in and eventually get both of what at one point in time were Florida's top-rated commits, well, we do think that'd be pretty fun. But at the very least, we know this. Humphrey is close to a decision. That's going to happen on Friday. Georgia seems to be a big factor in all of this, and we will tune in and find out exactly what he has to say there at that time. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Georgia's Own Credit Union. And, of course, we appreciate Georgia's Own Credit Union bringing Around the Doghouse to you each and every day. And certainly one of the things that you can turn to when it comes to Georgia's Own Credit Union is your chance to get a Visa Signature or Platinum card. That's one of those things that comes to you from our friends at Georgia's Own Credit Union. There's all kinds of opportunities available to you because of that. I'm talking about great perks that can be used on, travel, and you can get cash back if you want to. There's all kinds of terrific incentives. Plus, you can get up to $150 simply for signing up for one of these Visa Signature or Platinum cards. It's one of those great rewards that kind of comes your way through all of that. So make sure you check out georgiasown.org for more details. That's georgiasown.org. And you can find out about all of the great opportunities available to you because of the Visa Signature and Platinum card. So check that out, Georgia's Own Credit Union, online at georgiasown.org. All right, we're going to have some fun here. Good stuff all the way around. A chance to chat about everything happening in Knoxville, getting ready to go to Knoxville, I should say, for the Dogs on Saturday. The aftermath of what happened for Georgia with another blowout win on Saturday, even if it was one that some UGA fans felt like they weren't 100% satisfied with. The Georgia players and coaches themselves felt like they still left something on the table there in that game. And, of course, everything else as Georgia rolls through a busy November into what could be one of the wildest Decembers and Januaries that we have seen around here in quite some time. So there's a lot going on around UGA. Let's get all of it as part of a Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And we'll say hello to Connor Riley here, part of a Kroger Fresh Take with him, diving into everything happening around UGA. And Connor, I had to confess this a moment ago to our audience that, listen, sometimes it's just not quite as easy to be classy as it is at other times. And the demise that's seemingly happening around Florida, the true implosion that has happened since what went down with Georgia beating Florida a couple of weeks ago and everything in the aftermath of that, I really enjoy that. And to think that all of this could be then added to and compounded even more if former Florida commit Julian Humphrey were to commit to Georgia this week, that's almost too juicy for me to even stand.
Yeah, on the screen below it says, did Kirby Smart break Florida? I don't know if break is the right word. I think he made Florida quit, because that's what we saw on Saturday when Georgia played Florida. When Florida played at South Carolina, and it was just a really bad performance by a Florida team that clearly didn't want to be there, didn't want to be in the cold, and just really did not play its best football. And now you wonder going forward, where is this team going to end up being, and how are they going to end up playing? Dan Mullen no longer has control of really his fate in his football team at this point, because if they lose again, I think he's going to be fired. And so when you have that kind of a team and you have that kind of performance, it's now on the players if they want Dan Mullen to remain their head coach. Obviously, the recruiting isn't going to get better really in this season. You're going to have to maybe hope for that to be the case in the 2023 class, and maybe even 2024. But with where things are right now for Dan Mullen, it's in a really bad spot. And I think Georgia broke Clemson. I think Georgia broke Kentucky. Maybe there's a case we made they broke Arkansas. I don't know if they broke Florida, because Florida was already pretty broken coming in when you factor in the Kentucky and LSU losses. I think Florida's just ready to quit after what happened to Georgia against them.
We'll talk later on about some of the stuff that Anthony Richardson's recently put out on social media, but there's just a tolerance for weirdness at Florida that just doesn't seem to exist at a place like UGA. And this is the kind of thing that I think Georgia fans ought to be quite thankful for, that Kirby Smart just runs a tighter ship. And that doesn't always lead to happy times, because when there are rigid standards, not everybody's going to feel good about that at the time. And sometimes maybe you kind of roll your eyes down on the opposite side for whatever reason. But you're not going to see a lot of Georgia players goofing around on social media. You're not going to see a lot of Georgia players. You're not going to hear much of Georgia players goofing around a hotel before a game in which they're trying to avoid what would be a losing mark for, at least right now, a fifth loss for the season. There's just a high tolerance for goofiness at Florida. Mullen contributes that. I think teams always take on the personality of their coach, and I think that when you look at Florida, there's just a level of, I'm going to use the same word again, level of goofiness that seems to permeate there, that because Mullen's either tolerated or influenced the program in that direction.
Right. I mean, look back at last year, the Darth Vader press conference, the packing the swamp. You could go on and on, really, just even within looking in the confines of that 2020 season. I don't think it's a coincidence that this team started 2021 by just straight up not showing up in a bowl game against an Oklahoma team. And so they essentially quit at the end of last season. And what do you see them doing right now? Based off what we saw against South Carolina, it looks like we're going to see them quit again. And so once you sort of let that seep into your program, it's really hard to let that get out. Yeah, and you can think back to Kirby Smart because they had their own sort of Sugar Bowl moment against Texas after the 2018 season. And Kirby Smart very much said, we're not doing this again. We are not going down this same path. And you think that next year against Baylor, hey, if you don't want to be here, you don't want to play in this game, okay, totally fine. Just don't come on the trip. For the guys that want to be here and actually play in this game, you're coming on this trip. We are winning this game. You saw them do it against Baylor. You saw them do it against Cincinnati the last 2 years, even though those are not the type of bowl games that Georgia envisioned in playing in. So I think when you trace it back to Florida and really where the problems started to go wrong, yeah, the shoe toss to LSU last year wasn't great, and then they turned around and actually played Bama pretty well. But that moment right there was probably the beginning of the end, the Waterloo for Dan Mullen, when his team just didn't even bother to get on the bus to go to the airport in Gainesville to get to Dallas to play Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl.
I think it's probably right. Let me shift gears and talk about this for a moment. I said yesterday that I actually believe that Georgia's maybe a little due for a test, or just, styles make fights, and the particular opponent that Georgia's playing on Saturday in a hostile environment. Connor, I expect this to be a fourth quarter game. I expect Georgia to be tested by Tennessee in a way that it almost hasn't been all season long really by anybody. Watched a lot of that Kentucky. It's amazing when Georgia plays at noon. You just have a chance to see a lot more football than you normally see. I watched a lot of Tennessee, Kentucky on Saturday, and what I saw from Kentucky, playing better offensively they had in weeks, did a lot of the things that you would assume that Georgia wants to do. They were pretty good in the red zone. They were really good on third down. They were pretty good on a per-play basis. They had the football game for the entire night, and yet if you pay attention like win expectancy and things like that, it was always far more likely that Tennessee was going to win than Kentucky because Tennessee was averaging about 11 yards per play. That the explosiveness of Tennessee just negated the efficiency of Kentucky, and I think that's a reminder for Georgia on Saturday. As good as the Georgia defense is, Tennessee is going to swing for the fences here, and they hit a few of those, especially if they hit them early. We haven't seen Georgia playing with much of a deficit really at all season long. I just think this game sets up in a pretty interesting fashion for Georgia. I don't expect Georgia to lose, but do I expect Georgia to maybe make some plays late to preserve the win? I think there's a chance that might be the case. This may be the closest game that Georgia's played since Clemson on Saturday, I believe.
So you mentioned Tennessee, if they're hitting those swings and those big swings. If I could make a baseball analogy here, Tennessee likes to swing for a home run, and that's what they do. You've seen them do it against Alabama. You've seen them do it against Florida. What happens if they strike out on those big shots early? And what happens when they fall behind? Because that's what I think is going to happen in this game. Because, you mentioned all that, Kentucky did scoring the ball and moving the ball on them. Georgia's going to be able to do that as well. And I think Georgia, if they wanted to in this game, could get up to 70 points possibly against Tennessee. That defense is that porous. And so, yes, I understand why there might be some concern there. And Kirby Smart, I actually think, made an interesting analogy, comparing Tennessee's speed and tempo to that of Georgia Tech's triple option of the past, where there's nothing you can really do to prepare for it. Now, Kirby Smart almost immediately found a way to do that by preparing and installing, triple option practice periods over the course of the season. And, while it hasn't been in a while, Georgia and Kirby Smart have seen this Josh Heupel offense before when he was at Missouri. And then, granted, Heupel in that 2017 season did have some success there. So I see and I get the point you're coming from. And sure, on the road at Neyland, it could be a stiffer test. But what happens when they don't hit on those plays early? I wonder if this game, if Tennessee, and I would point out, against Florida, when Florida still looked like it had interest in playing a football season, against Alabama, Alabama and Florida were hanging around halftime in those games. And in the second half, because Tennessee doesn't have the depth, game was over. And I point out, look at Tennessee's last four games. Now, yes, there's a bye game scheduled in between there. Ole Miss, at Alabama, bye week, Kentucky, and then Georgia. That's a brutal four-game stretch there. So I understand why there's some concern with this Tennessee team and this Tennessee game and the way that they play. But if they don't hit on those big shots early, they very clearly don't have the depth to make this a four-quarter game. I'm actually thinking of zagging and saying this is actually going to be another blowout. This Georgia team knows, hey, can't give up big plays early, and because Tennessee is so reliant on those big plays, I wonder if they're going to be able to stay in this early.
I'll go so far as to say this, Connor. If you end up being right, and you might. If you end up being right, and if Georgia blows out Tennessee on the road on Saturday, then a national championship might just truly be inevitable. That this is one of those games where I see two things going on here. I've actually been fairly impressed with Hendon Hooker, and I started the year trying to make the case for Harrison Bailey being the Vols quarterback because I care about these things. I just like the SEC. So I'm interested in what all the SEC teams do. And I thought that Bailey was the quarterback that Tennessee should turn to. The fact is, when Hooker's been in the game, he's clearly been the best quarterback they have, so much so that Bailey's no longer in the program and that Milton would only play if Hooker was hurt. And normally when you have these aggressively fast-tempo teams, normally there's maybe a byproduct of turnovers there. But I believe that Hooker's only thrown 2 picks all season long, so they found a way to play fast without getting the turnovers. I think it's interesting that Kirby made the Tech comparison yesterday because we did say on yesterday's show that, hey, when Georgia talked during the bye week about preparing for upcoming opponents, that used to mean preparing for Georgia Tech. And in this particular year, that when Kirby said that this season, using that off week to prepare for upcoming opponents, it was almost certainly Tennessee they were preparing for because Tennessee is just the weirdest team they play. I've had smart people tell me that nobody plays faster than Tennessee. Kirby Smart himself has kind of acknowledged that. And here's what I believe on Saturday. One of the reasons why I think a convincing win would prove so much about Georgia is because I do think that Georgia needs to make some explosive plays of its own to make sure that the margin stays comfortable, to thwart any chance that Tennessee might have to get that crowd involved in the game. And if we assume that Stetson Bennett's going to be the guy to do that, well, if he creates those explosive plays in a game like this, then I think he shows you that he can be the guy that some Georgia fans wonder if he can be. I think a convincing win for Georgia in a tough spot on Saturday, I just think that'd be pretty telling about what Georgia might have in store for December and January.
But hasn't Stetson Bennett already done that when he went on the road against the better Auburn team and played, I thought, a pretty fantastic game there that day?
I think that the style that Tennessee plays is a tougher challenge for Georgia than Auburn is, even though Auburn's probably certainly the deeper team in comparison to Tennessee and maybe even the better team in comparison to Tennessee. I do think Tennessee's harder for Georgia to beat.
So do you have questions about whether this offense is going to be able to hit explosive plays? Because last Saturday they were able to do so against the Missouri defense that is just as bad as the one they're going to see on Saturday. So
yeah, I would, to answer your question, I'll let you finish, but to answer your question, yeah, I still do have some questions about that. That's not to say that I doubt them totally and fully, but am I skeptical? What if Tennessee, wins the coin toss, gets the ball first, marches right down the field and score? That's not a scenario we've seen Georgia in very much. They were down 3-0 on Saturday. They were down for 11 plays against Auburn. We haven't seen Georgia facing a deficit very much this year. But what if Tennessee gets the ball, marches down the field and scoring? Now you give the ball back over to Stetson Bennett. There's a little, I'm talking about to start the game potentially, there's a little bit of skepticism on my part of, I want to see that before I fully believe that Georgia can match the big plays offensively when they need to. Admittedly, I'm still waiting to learn that.
Well, I'd be skeptical that we'd see that Tennessee march the ball downfield on this Georgia defense so far this year, just given we haven't seen a team do that. Georgia has not given up a first-quarter touchdown all season, if I'm remembering correctly there. So, I understand why there's some concern and some worry with this game, but Tennessee is also a 5-4 football team at this moment. It is not like they are even in the Michigan realm or that fringe, top 15 team. This Tennessee team does have some clear issues. That Kentucky offense had really struggled in recent weeks, and then they go in there and go up 42 points on the board. So I expect Georgia to be able to move the ball and score consistently enough in this game to where I'm really not that concerned about this game. He sure is on the road, but again, this Georgia team has played well when they've gone up to Neyland and Knoxville before. You think back to 2019 when that offense we know now was not very good. They still moved the ball with ease in that game against Tennessee there. So I understand where the concern comes from because Tennessee is kind of a hot team in the way that they're playing offense right now. But to everyone saying Georgia hasn't seen an offense as good as Tennessee, Tennessee has not seen a defense nearly as good as Georgia, and I think that's going to show up on Saturday.
Yeah, no question about that. Let me shift gears here. Quarterback for a moment. What I said after Saturday's game was that the fact that Kirby even played JT, gave him a chance to throw the football, gave him a significant number of snaps. To me, that left the door open that Daniels could still eventually be the quarterback of this team in the games that matter most. If obviously Daniels didn't play at all on Saturday, that'd be pretty telling. And yet my addendum to all this is that this is the last game of significance for Georgia during the regular season. If Daniels doesn't play more this week than he did last week, if he doesn't play earlier, sooner in the game than he did a week ago, then barring injury, Georgia's kind of made its choice, has it not?
I think they may have already made their choice. I know, people saw what they want to saw in JT. He threw the touchdown. He came in. He actually got to throw and operate the offense as sort of intended on Saturday. But Stetson took all the meaningful snaps in that game. It was 33-3 by the time JT came in the second half of that game there. And so I think the die may already be cast as far as what Georgia wants to do at its quarterback position this year. And again, if Georgia's going to get Arian Smith back and Jermaine Burton and potentially Dominic Blaylock back, if they're going to get those guys back, it's going to help Stetson out quite a bit because for everyone, in the point about the wide receivers, well, Stetson wasn't playing with those guys either. And as we saw on Saturday, those guys are able to make plays on the ball and actually, I think, help Stetson and take away some of the turnover-worthy plays that he had made against Florida, certainly. If they're able to turn those into either breakups or positive plays, as we saw with the Jermaine Burton near touchdown there, I think that's only going to help Stetson more in what he's able to do. So, I'll be interested to see what they do with JT in this game. Would I be surprised if we saw it follow a similar script where Georgia gets up big and then they insert JT in there and sort of let him run the offense as opposed to doing the 2018, I'm just going to hand that ball off really well offense? Maybe, and they're going to continue to get him reps, I think, against Charleston Southern and Georgia Tech to keep both those guys fresh because Kirby has said he believes he has two really good quarterbacks. But based off what we saw on Saturday, I think we're going to continue to see Stetson Bennett as the quarterback for Georgia.
Let me give you the opinion I've given on this topic a couple of times that I used the word skeptical earlier. I'm still a little skeptical that if you choose Bennett, and as you said, Georgia may have done that or in the process of currently doing that, if you choose Bennett over Daniels, there's a part of me that's skeptical that maybe is the wrong choice, that still believe you got to have the most explosive offensive component that you can to win a national championship. I still personally believe that's likely Daniels over Bennett. However, what I acknowledged on the show yesterday is that Kirby Smart knows the stakes here. It's his own personal reputation that's at risk if he were to get this wrong. And he's also privy, and this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it out loud nonetheless, he's also privy to so much more data and information behind the scenes that presumably there's a reason that he's making the choice that he's making because he knows what people will say if it turns out to be wrong. And given the fact that Georgia is so clearly the number one team in the country right now, and so much of that is built on the back of Smart's vision for this program when he first took over the job. Connor, I don't mean to be trite when I say this, but I mean this literally. Smart's earned the right to make this decision. If this is the way that he wants to attempt to further his own legacy, I think he's earned the right to make this choice. There's a part of me that may be thinking he's making the wrong choice, but I think that Smart has deservedly built up enough credibility. If he wants to make the unorthodox choice at quarterback, it's his choice to make, and I'm sort of willing to ride with him on this, even if I'm speaking as a fan here, even if I don't fully think he's making the right choice, I'm gonna ride with him on this, even if it's a little bit weird.
If Stetson Bennett were a 4-star quarterback, is there the hand wringing over the quarterback position that currently exists?
I think that's a fair question, and my answer to that is this, that the most tangible knock on Stetson was that he wasn't really considered for the starting job before the season began this year, nor before the season began last year. So, I get what you're saying, that there's this perception of because he's a little smaller, because his recruiting profile is essentially non-existent, therefore people have falsely assumed he's not a good quarterback. But the Georgia coaches themselves, on at least 2 occasions, and you could probably say 3 occasions when they were more than happy to let him leave the program after 2017. On 3 different occasions, Stetson's essentially been told that he's not starting quarterback material. So this is not just a fan perception thing on the basis of how good a recruit he once was. The Georgia coaches who evaluate him during practice have found him lacking now 3 times. Now, as it turns out, they may have just been wrong. I mean, Stetson Bennett really has proven himself to be a gamer over and over and over again. The results obviously speak for themselves. But this is not just a misperception on the basis of a lack of hype.
So Stetson is allowed to get better and improve
Sure.
and show that he is a better player, because I would point out as well, a lot of people didn't want to see Ladd McConkey play, and a lot of people straight up thought they'd never see Ladd McConkey play.
That's true.
Among
That's
Georgia's
true.
receivers this season,
That's true.
Ladd McConkey is statistically the best receiver that Georgia has. So, again, and I don't think even Ladd is facing some of the same criticisms or concerns that Stetson is. And granted, part of that comes with the difference between quarterback and wide receiver. But, I mean, look, Stetson came out and played really well against Missouri on Saturday. 2 touchdowns, very nearly had 4 touchdowns if Jermaine Burton doesn't get tackled at the 1-yard line twice. So I understand the concern and people saying, oh, well, can he do this against Alabama? I'd like to see Alabama run for more than 7 yards against the Georgia defense because they only had 6 against LSU on Saturday. So I understand that, because Stetson, and they've used Stetson through this certain prism that dates back to his recruiting profile, then a loss against Alabama last season, that he's always sort of going to be viewed as this. But let's focus on JT Daniels here a little bit. I know Mike Griffith might not love to hear this, but JT Daniels has played in 4 games this season. He's thrown an interception in 3 of them, and it's not like he is some cure-all at this quarterback position. He is shown to make some pretty risky or poor throws there as well. He is not a perfect quarterback option. And again, the thing with JT, he has to prove that he can stay healthy consistently. Yeah. And one thing I think Stetson does well is he does not seem to take that big hit. Even on Saturday, JT was taking hits during that game. And you've seen guys at the NFL level sort of not be able to avoid those big hits, and it affects their durability. Andrew Luck, Carson Wentz come to mind there, where Stetson Bennett, his scrambling ability not only helps him extend plays, as we saw to one of the near touchdown passes to Jermaine Burton, but it also keeps him from getting hit and thus keeps him upright in game. So I do think that's worth considering with this Georgia quarterback position going forward, because let's say you choose to bench Stetson again, and you go with JT, and JT gets hurt again, as has happened a couple of times now. What might you get out of Stetson, knowing that this coaching staff pretty clearly has shown that it does not believe in him if it makes the switch to JT?
Good stuff. Connor, let me remind folks, this is our Kroger Fresh Take, and obviously around our household and so many households just like us, we're already talking about Thanksgiving meals and how we can stretch those dollars this year and get the most out of our experience, obviously given the fact that the world's a little bit of a strange place right now. That's why we love turning to Kroger, because they help you get the most out of your holiday meal. Whether it's Thanksgiving this month, rolling in December, and everything else that goes along with that, that's what Kroger can do for you. That's when we love recommending them for everything you need for the Thanksgiving feast, the food and all the stuff that goes along with that, the sides, the beverages and everything else. You can get stocked up on everything you need for a great Thanksgiving right there at your local Kroger. So stop by and see them today. And it's not too soon to start shopping for that. I know my family, we're already talking about the things that we're looking forward to enjoying here for Thanksgiving. I love this time of year as the holidays kind of blend in with what's going on with football. That is always a really cool thing. Connor, I had plenty more we could talk about, but we're kind of running a little short on time. So let me just say thanks for being with us, and we'll look forward to reading a bunch more from you at DawgNation.com there as well.
Yep, as always, it was a pleasure.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So let me repeat something that I've kind of said before, that and Connor kind of brings this to mind, and then after this we'll leave quarterback alone for the rest of the show. So when you're having quarterback conversation between the Bennett, the Daniels thing, one of the things that will occasionally get thrown into the conversation, and I think I mentioned this to John Stinchcomb yesterday, and it almost sounds like sort of a flippant add-on, but people say, well, with the way that Georgia's playing defense, it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback. I'm not quite so sure I believe that's true. I still think who is at quarterback does matter for UGA. I don't think the gap between Georgia and the rest of the country is so wide that Georgia can just make whatever decision it wants. I still think there are going to be buttons that are going to be pushed one way or another that will determine if UGA wins a championship or not this season. But if we were to stipulate for a moment those that do say that are correct, and it really doesn't matter that Georgia's built such an overwhelming edge in comparison to the rest of the country that it's already proven it's the best team in the country, if that be the case, then I am clearly not making any changes, because you don't give back anything that's already proven itself to be the very best in the country. So a lot of the quarterback discussion for Georgia kind of centers around this in a roundabout way. Is, do you believe that Georgia's already proven itself to be the best team in the country? If you do believe that, then you're also probably not in favor of any changes. If you have some doubts, though, that Georgia really has distanced itself from the rest of the group, from the rest of the pack of would-be title contenders, then you are obviously looking then to say, well, how can you maximize that opportunity? And that's where Daniels kind of veers into this. But regardless of whether it's JT, regardless of whether it's Stetson Bennett, the real vibe that has made this team go this season is the vibe of talented, in many cases, 5-star level players who've chosen to sacrifice some of that individual glory to fit into a team concept. And the guy that's orchestrated all of that has been Kirby Smart. For as good as the UGA assistants are and as talented as these players are, this is Kirby Smart's vision. This is his idea of what Georgia football was supposed to be, and it's coming to life right now. And Smart knows what's at stake. So I think you are not under an obligation. Sometimes on message board you see the trust the coaches meme. You are not under obligation to trust the coaches in every situation and every moment. Coaches can make mistakes. They can make errors. But in this particular case, Smart, I believe, has earned the credibility to make the choice he wants to make, even if it is the unorthodox choice. Let me also mention this. How about Royal Caribbean cruising around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean here, and it's a great time for you yourself to be on a Royal Caribbean cruise. Great time to go out there and see what's happening on all the great destinations that Royal Caribbean ships sail to, including all throughout the Caribbean, the Bahamas, leaving out of Port Canaveral as a for instance, taking advantage of that private island oasis in the Bahamas known as Perfect Day Coco Cay. Great time to experience that, whether it's the thrill side, where you got the tallest water slide in North America, you've got the helium balloon that takes you 450 feet in the air, obviously on the chill side, you've got the largest freshwater pool in the Bahamas. You get those private cabanas that really almost make you feel like you're in Bora Bora, somewhere like that. You're just kind of chilling out, relaxing. That's what they do for you on the chill side there. It's only available to those who are on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. The only ships that sail there are those Royal Caribbean ships. So check out Perfect Day Coco Cay. And obviously our invitation to you is, when you book a Royal Caribbean vacation, is to use folks who understand all of the things are going to be perfect for you and really tailor a vacation that suits you, a cruise destination, a cruise vacation that's really fitting your needs and those that you're taking with you on your cruise. So that's why we love recommending our friends, the Cruise and Vacation Authority. And I'm going to tell you how you can get in touch with the Cruise and Vacation Authority. You can reach out to them on the website, tcava.com. That's tcava.com. Once again, let me say that again because I kind of went a little fast there. tcava.com. Or you can give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300. All right, cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let's start with this, and I think we have this to show. So Anthony Richardson, the Florida quarterback, did not play against South Carolina on Saturday night, and rumors quickly started bubbling up that he'd injured himself while dancing at the team hotel the night before the game. Then Richardson was, I guess you'll say, good enough to share with us on social media yesterday the dance that he was doing that led to the injury. Now, first of all, I don't see how anybody wouldn't break their knee trying to do this dance. If you're watching this on video, this is quite a lot of torque there on the knee. But there's something about this tweet from Richardson that I just find to be very casual. And you should know this. Like, I make fun of Mullen on Twitter all the time. You'll be hard-pressed to ever find me make fun of a player. I just don't do that. Even Florida players, I'm just not going to make fun of them very much. So I stayed out of the whole, let me mock this guy on social media for this. But honestly, if you're a Florida fan, how demoralizing is this? Know that in a game that your team lost and now give you 5 on the season, a quarterback who could have helped you didn't play and is basically joking, at least this comes across to me as a joke, for why he didn't play and the fact that he's goofing around the team hotel before the game. Now, listen, I realize players aren't robots, and even the night before the game, there needs to be a little bit of a downtime vibe. You need to have a little bit of relaxed atmosphere going into a game. I get all that. I'm not trying to be 100 years old here, but boy, something about this just feels really casual. I mean, something about this just feels like, do you care or not? And that's what Florida seems to be dealing with. And when Dan Mullen does all the weird stuff that he does, eventually everybody in the program is going to act weird. And Florida's always had this very, I guess you call it like laissez-faire attitude about social media. They let their players just tweet whatever. And oftentimes that does not paint the program in a great light. And boy, I don't know. I just don't know about all of that. This is one of those days where obviously we revel in all the misery for Florida, but it's also one of those days where you just say a little thank you for the fact that Georgia just runs itself in a completely different way than just the goofiness that's tolerated at Florida. What an awful time to be a Gators fan. By the way, this was funny. So we're in the age now where for the most part, college programs do not hold back on really trolling their opponents on social media. I'm struggling to think of examples where Georgia's done a ton of this through the official accounts. Maybe they have, But it seems like Georgia, for the most part, doesn't really do this kind of stuff. But, man, there are other programs. Like Ole Miss is unmerciful. Ole Miss did some stuff at Kiffin. They eventually had to not Kiffin, but they did some stuff towards Hugh Freeze. They eventually had to delete the other day. And then South Carolina, who has a very clever video department, probably one of the better video departments in the SEC. So Josh Vann catches an easy touchdown on Saturday, and they were joking about how much time that Vann had. I think we may have this that we can show folks. The Vann touchdown, and the funny caption says, so much room for activities. Like, there's not a player than 100 miles of Josh Vann. And then the video goes on to say things that Josh Vann could have done before anybody on defense could have gotten to him. And it shows him ordering a meal, and he's just doing all this kind of stuff. And, I mean, you have to really put your back into this to make this video. And obviously, South Carolina wanted to. They wanted to mock and make fun of he's playing golf there. That's really funny. But we're just kind of in the age now where that's what these programs are going to do. They're going to make fun of each other on social media. And I think for fans, it's actually pretty enjoyable. You know, there's a time for coach speak, and usually the time for coach speak is when coaches are speaking. But when, you know, folks outside the boundaries of the head coach are doing things for the program, there's no reason why we can't have fun. Obviously, fans love talking trash back and forth with each other. And so getting the official Twitter accounts involved on something like that, I don't think that's such a bad thing. I don't really mind that at all. So especially when it's South Carolina making fun of Florida, you love that. And so that was great to see. Tonight's a big night for college football. The College Football Playoff Top 25 will be re-released. No mystery at the top. We know that's going to be Georgia. But what happens after that? I told you last week I had no problem with Alabama being number 2. I felt like that they were clearly the second-best team in the country. But the problem is they sort of played like number 2 last week against LSU, so you're left to wonder, will they still be there in this spot come Saturday, especially tonight, especially given the fact that there's this cheerleading campaign for Cincinnati on the part of some in the media, and they want to see Cincinnati and Alabama graded the exact same way, given the fact that Alabama struggled the team won the national championship 2 years ago, and Cincinnati struggled with Tulsa on this past Saturday. So I've told you before that I don't think Cincinnati is really deserving of being in the national championship playoff conversation. Struggling with the Golden Hurricanes on Saturday, I think, validates that even more. I don't expect Cincinnati to be much higher than 6 where they were last week. In fact, that may be the ceiling. They have no chance of moving past that. So it is true, though, that Alabama did not play well against LSU, so there's room for them to drop a little bit. I guess you could say that Oregon has a chance to move up, probably will. Clearly they'll move up to at least 3rd because Michigan State lost. Then you start wondering about, what about Ohio State? Ohio State didn't play particularly well either against Nebraska on Saturday. And is there a chance that Michigan kind of moves up here? What about Oklahoma? Oklahoma didn't even play. It would be very funny to me if Oklahoma was a big mover tonight on the basis of having played an off week, a bye week last week. That'd be kind of a strange thing, but there's also a chance that happens. Right now, we're in kind of that weird mode of the season where the only team that's playing well week in, week out is really Georgia. That from week to week, you really have no idea what you're going to get from Alabama. Ohio State's kind of the same way, to be honest with you. 1 week they're dominant. The last couple of weeks they've been something less than that. For the most part, everybody kind of thinks Michigan State's a pretender as it is. Oklahoma doesn't play enough defense to be taken seriously. I'm still of the belief that the 2 biggest threats to Georgia are probably Ohio State and Alabama, but it's fair to say those 2 teams have not really looked like that as of late. This is a very strange time right now where, I mean, you're just struggling to make a case. It's like, not only do we not need a 14 playoff, we might not even need a BCS title game on the basis of what's happening right now. This could be like the 80s where you just sort of vote Georgia national champion. Now, listen, I expect it to tighten up, and I expect Georgia to be challenged before it's all said and done. But it's very strange right now when you just don't really see anyone who's anywhere near the universe of UGA based on the way that teams are currently playing. As I said before, my expectation is that you do see some real contenders emerge. I still think it's most likely Alabama, most likely Ohio State. But wow, how strange is that after last Saturday, you just didn't really see any of the national contenders play very well other than Georgia. Georgia won 43-6, and you still had a lot of nitpicking from within the program about what could have been better. Perspective to be kept here that almost every team in the country, in fact, every single team in the country would eagerly trade places with where UGA is right now. Number 1 with a bullet next to its name and seemingly with room to improve as guys continue to get healthy. So we'll see the College Football Playoff Top 25 re-released tonight. One more thing I want to tell you about. Obviously, we're going to get into that time of year where folks start thinking about next phase of life, especially for young people or the parents of young people. This is why I want you to think about my friends at the Technical College System of Georgia, because you can be that person that moves on to a great career with no student loans. And how much more empowered would you be to start your professional life if you're doing so without the burden, the debt that comes from those student loans? You can also be in a career that you love. That's obviously a great thing there as well. And you don't have to wait long to get it started. You can be in this career. You can be making some real money and building a life for yourself in 2 years or less. Lucrative fields all across the place. That's what the Technical College System of Georgia can provide for you there. It's a surprisingly affordable education opportunity that creates great professional outlook for you, great job market, great opportunities to really be in rewarding, lucrative career without the student debt and really build a great life for yourself. So you go to the website, succeedsooner.com. It's succeedsooner.com. There's more than 22 colleges across the state, 600 different programs, all kinds of choices for you to make put yourself on a great professional path that's affordable, that doesn't come with a bunch of debt, that's just a great experience. So check out the website, succeedsooner.com, for a lot more on that. All right, as we wrap up here today, a couple golden shoes to give out. One of these is Jordan Davis, hashtag JD to NYC related. There was a picture that we had for you yesterday that some folks have been sharing around on social media, and one of our guys, Russell Jafaris, sent this to us with the hashtag JD to NYC. This picture to me is so funny. It's Davis tackling a Missouri running back, but it almost looks like he's saving a child from like a burning car or something like that. Like he looks like he's a fireman, like rushing in to pull somebody out of a burning building. I mean, that's just how big and imposing Jordan Davis is. I think sometimes a picture really can tell a story that stats and testimony never could. Just look at how imposing Jordan Davis is right there. Great job by Russell Jafaris, who gives the hashtag JD to NYC, and we'll give Russell the golden shoe just for that. Also, as we think about Tennessee coming up on Saturday, our buddy Barkalot, who's quite a prolific winner of golden shoes, gives us the Tennessee fan with the orange and white overalls, the mustard going back to the Ole Miss game a couple of weeks ago. I would dare say that Tennessee may be the most photogenic fan base because they're always doing goofy stuff in the stands, and Barkalot certainly identifies that. We'll give him a golden shoe for that. And, of course, lousy, stinking Gators. Not too soon to start thinking about next season. 354 days from now, Dogs go back to Jacksonville, beat Florida again, and don't you know we'll be reveling in that again once again there as well. We appreciate you being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Certainly appreciate those of you who missed out on us at DawgNation.com at the 1st and 15, the beginning of the show, getting with us here today. We appreciate that. In fact, as a way of saying thank you, I'll actually start over there today with your comments, and we'll kind of make up for what we missed out a little earlier. I'll also make sure I had the Facebook pulled up. Now I just X'd out of it. So let me get back into Facebook here too, just to save us some time there on the back end of all that. And as I'm doing all that, let me remind you, R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Cold right now. That means your furnace getting ready to go for the weekend that's on its way. So check that out online at rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. Getting that heating system tuned back up to factory fresh specs, keeping you warm throughout the winter that's going to be here before you know it, and really kind of already on its way here right now. So all of that you can check out. So over here at DawgNation.com, a few comments, and we probably won't go super long on the comments today just because I think we went pretty long yesterday. All right. Let's see what else. Score check on the idea of people going to the portal. Look, I can't get worked up about who's going to the portal or whatever else. And, you know, this idea that there'd be speculation without any kind of like substantial evidence to support the case of, well, this guy's not playing, maybe he'll go to the portal. Or that guy's not playing, maybe he'll go to the portal. That's the kind of thing that the Georgia team justifiably ought to try to block out. And here's what I'll tell you is, once the offseason arrives for Georgia, and the hope is the offseason hasn't arrived until the middle of January, Georgia's going to lose some players to the transfer portal. It's always going to happen. Georgia's going to lose some players to the transfer portal. Georgia may lose a quarterback to the transfer portal. It's just going to happen. The only thing you can control is who you bring into the program. Any salesman will tell you this, that you don't really have a whole lot of control over your closed deals. You know, things fizzle, people flake out, people are just weird. That as a salesman, you don't have strong control over the deals you close, but you have full control over the pipeline of prospects. And that's what every salesperson understands. Coaches are the same way. Once a player gets to your program, sometimes they turn out not to be who you thought they were. And that happens. And that's just a fact. I hear this from, back channel conversations all the time, not necessarily at Georgia, but across the SEC. So-and-so got here, come to find out he can't run. Thought he could, come to find out he couldn't. That kind of stuff just sort of happens a little bit. So you just can't control that. Guy gets here, gets homesick. You can't control that. Guy gets here, gets injured. You really can't control that. You got, programs across the country tampering with your players all the time now. Think about what happened to Tyreek Stevenson as an example of that. You can't really control what other programs do. Goodness knows the NCAA is not going to enforce the rules. You can't control that. The only thing you can control is who you're bringing into the program. And if the pipeline of what you're bringing in is big enough, if it's robust enough, then you'll always be in good shape. So I'm not sweating the transfer portal. I'm not. When it comes January, when there is a substantive report on something, I'm happy to talk about it. But I'm not going to speculate because so-and-so only got 1 catch and didn't get 5 catches that somehow he's going to transfer. If he does, I'll shake his hand and wish him well, because Georgia's always going to have players who can play. Let's see what else. Randy Hall says, glad you're pulling us up first. I'm glad to do that there as well. William Perry let us know that Max Cleland passed away today. I did not realize that. That's very sad to hear. Obviously, one of the most influential, residents of the state for a long, long time. Matt Rukavina checks in to say it's funny that Tennessee fans keep saying we haven't seen their offense. Well, 4 of the teams didn't seem like a big problem. Yeah, I mean, as I said before, my respect for Tennessee here is not to say that, oh my gosh, they're just going to just obliterate Georgia. That's not what I'm saying. And I think Matt's bringing a pretty good point that, it's not an unstoppable offense. There's a reason they've lost as much as they have. But Alabama, Tennessee was close through a lot of the first half, and, Tennessee, Florida was even a little closer there for a while. That what I think of really what Tennessee has the ability to do is, this is what I've been saying, someone should try to do against Georgia all season long, is even though Tennessee averaged like about 11 yards per play against Kentucky, they are not going to line up and handle Georgia on a per-play basis. They're not going to do that. But can they swing for the fences and connect on 1 out of 5 or even 1 out of 10 times? I mean, 3 or 4 explosive plays over the course of a game can change a game. And, I mean, if you get stuffed on every play other than that, first of all, what does it really matter? That's what every team does against Georgia anyway. But what most teams don't do is create those 3 or 4 other explosive play opportunities that if you really try to block it just long enough to hit deep, you got a chance to do that. Hey, do you mind? I know you're doing 1,000 things, but do you mind just zooming us in a little bit here on that, just so people can see the moneymaker here for a second? Let's see what else. Let me go over to Facebook here for a moment. Somebody also talking about transfer portal stuff over here on the Facebook side of things. I mean, my advice would be enjoy the season that Georgia's in and watch the magical things that are happening right now. And that if somebody contributes to a national championship, they want to go play somewhere else, I will gladly shake their hand and wish them well on the way out the door. And if somebody leaves this team because they weren't playing as much as they want to, then I'm assuming there was a reason for that there as well. And once again, I'll gladly shake their hand and wish them well on the way out the door. There are very few instances where I won't be happy to look somebody in the eye and wish them well if they're willing to move on from the Georgia program. That is just kind of the way that goes for me. Somebody asked, Scotty Gorp, I guess, asked about Darnell Washington. So he had a catch on Saturday, right? I mean, I think there's this, first of all, I think Georgia had, 4 different tight ends had catches on Saturday? Did Brett Seither get a catch at the end of the game? Fitzpatrick got a catch. Brock Bowers got a catch. Darnell Washington got a catch. And Seither either did or didn't. I feel like he was targeted, but I honestly don't remember. I mean, that's getting tight ends involved to a pretty good degree. There's also this, I think this magical team somewhere in the universe that's like throwing 1,000 balls to tight ends. For the most part, no one's really doing that. Like Alabama's had like legitimate great tight ends, like O.J. Howard was former 5-star. O.J. Howard had a big year for Todd Monken in 2018 with the Tampa Bay Bucks. But for the most part, Alabama never threw to O.J. Howard either. That, there's just not a lot of teams like that are using tight ends to huge degree. The fact that Georgia's using the position as much as it is right now is a pretty telling thing. But obviously, you've got a multitude of guys who are playing at that position right now. Let me get this comment here. Hugh Nash writes in to say, I can simultaneously love Stat and be incredibly grateful for him and still want a healthy JT and believe he gives us the most potentially potent offense. At the end of the day, we have to trust this coaching staff. So I agree with almost every single part of that. And in fact, that's pretty close to what my opinion is, that I do love Stetson Bennett. Not only do I love him as a player, I love watching him play. I think Stetson Bennett's really fun to watch play. Stetson Bennett kind of reminds me of, I don't know, like a Steph. I'm not saying he's the college football version of Steph Curry, but there's just something really cool about smaller guys succeeding in sports that I always find to be fascinating. And it's one of the reasons why Curry's so popular. Curry remains one of the most popular players in the NBA. And I think the unique nature of his size in comparison to the rest of the league is a huge reason for that. I get some of those same vibes watching Stead. It's almost like it's a magic trick. How is this smaller guy having this success? So I both like him as a player, but I also like watching him play. And yet I also kind of believe that Georgia's probably at its best with JT Daniels. But I am not such an egomaniac that I presume that my ability to read a situation on the outside is as correct as someone else's ability to read the situation on the inside. That there is a reason that they are playing Bennett over Daniels. And I don't know what it is. And in fact, I'm so unsure of what it is that even privately, I'm not quite so sure I even want to guess about what it is. But it is a reason. It is not a choice, if the choice continues. It is not a choice that's made lightly. And given the fact that so many of Smart's other choices are working out pretty well right now, I just think he's got to have earned the right to make this one this way. Because, obviously he knows he's going to get just absolutely lampooned if he makes the wrong quarterback choice. And if, once again, quarterback is seemingly the thing that derails what otherwise would have been a championship season. Smart knows what's going to happen there. And trust me, not only, Smart's a tenacious competitor. You all know that. Like, his legacy matters to him. And getting Georgia to that championship level matters to him. And so this is not one of those things where, I hear people come up with all these psychobabble reasons that Smart might be doing this, and I just find all of that lacking. I just find all of it lacking. That there is a reason, but on the outside, interpreting what that reason is probably not easy to do. And, maybe on Saturday they go in a different direction. Who knows? Robbie Pearson, that's very funny. I'm not going to read that, but that's very funny. Eric Emmett says Monken can win with either quarterback, and Eric brings up a really good point here. And this is the thing that should not be lost. The Georgia offense is working, and you may say, well, there's this higher threshold of achievement that could be obtained. Maybe so, but when you make any kind of change, there's also a chance that somehow it's not quite as good as it once was. This is the one thing that no one considers a possibility, which is, I think, a possibility, that Georgia could make a change, exclusively go to JT Daniels, and things could get worse. They could. For whatever reason, no reason at all, things just kind of happen kind of weirdly. But we said this the other day. Georgia, as of the other day, I don't know, maybe it changed after this past week, but as recently as last week, Georgia was averaging more yards per play than Ole Miss. All we hear about is how smart Lane Kiffin is, what an offensive genius he is. He's got, the supposed Heisman Trophy winner, Matt Corral. But on a per-play basis, they were averaging fewer yards per play than Georgia was. And that kind of stuff sort of gets lost in the shuffle, that Todd Monken is the best offensive coordinator that Georgia has had in the Smart era. They are scoring 30 points with regularity. They've scored 30 in every game except for Clemson. That one way or another, this offense is playing better than it has. It is on pace to be the most successful offense of the Smart era. 2018 is the previous high water mark there. This offense is on pace to be better than that. Scotty Gorp says that Stetson Bennett's stats match up with Bo Nix. He also outplayed Nix a couple times, beat him head-to-head now twice. Over here on YouTube. Memphis Dog says, Bama's coming. I want both quarterbacks ready. And I am still of the belief on this. Even though the evidence is pretty lacking right now, I still assume that Alabama is going to give Georgia just an absolute bar fight of a game. I really do. And it almost, this is where I kind of get a little bit dumb, but it almost scares me a little bit they're not playing better right now, because I just think it becomes easier for some people to imagine that they don't still have that gear in them. And I do think they have it. Now, this isn't a far cry from what Alabama once was. Far cry. Even some of the things where I thought Alabama would be pretty good, they're not. Like, I thought John Mechie would have a great season. He's kind of not. I mean, Jameis Williams, I think, is pretty good. But the running game's not really there. I mean, you got to block Will Anderson. Will Anderson's the kind of like one-man force that could single-handedly almost keep Alabama in a game like that against Georgia. So I still have great respect for what I think Alabama might be able to do against UGA, even though the evidence right now is actually pretty thin. Paul Anthony Baseball says, if our dogs can get this done, I'm going to celebrate the championship a perfect day, Coco K. That's actually a pretty good idea. That's actually a very good idea. By the way, I also need to mention this. So we got a bunch of stuff coming up, and I want you to be aware of this. I put this on Twitter last night, and this is kind of a fun thing to think about, that we have a couple of big announcements in the very, very near future, including a place that we used to go a lot. We haven't really been back to it in a while. I think we may have something kind of fun on that. Plus, some of you have been asking, SEC Championship, hey, anything going to be going down on that particular Saturday? Stay tuned. We're going to be very, very close to giving you all the details. One of those things where, like, you got 1,000 different people got to weigh in on stuff like this. I's got to be dotted, T's got to be crossed, and all that kind of stuff. But we are this close. We're like at the 5-yard line maybe of getting ready to make the announcement. It's that kind of cool goal line package. We're going to rush in Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and get ready to make that announcement very soon about some big, big things happening that first Saturday in December there in downtown Atlanta, if you get my drift. So stay tuned for us. We have a series of really fun announcements that could be coming up very, very close in the days ahead. Jonathan Aaron said there was a press conference moment for Dan Mullen yesterday where a reporter asked Mullen if he was the problem with Florida. I didn't see the full Mullen press conference yesterday, but that's really fun. Jacob Phillips says, is Kirby going to cause a bad narrative going to the SEC championship game? A quarterback argument is all we will hear the entire week before it starts if he doesn't cement a starter. But here's the thing you got to understand, though, is that for the most part, the argument about quarterbacks is really only taking place among fans. It's not even really taking place among the media right now. And I've said this before. I mean, you don't really see a lot of national media questioning the smart decision right now. To the extent that you pay attention to other local media, there's not a ton of that right now either. The only place this exists is with the fans. Now, does that mean that somebody else will rise up and be ready to pounce on Kirby if it goes wrong with Stetson Bennett? But understand this. I mean, look at all the big sources of college football chatter. This is not a hot topic. There is no one out there right now who's really making a strong case. I'm talking about among the national media. There's really nobody making a strong case for quarterback change in Georgia. There's just not. And I also take that to mean something. I'm not quite sure what it means. But, I mean, these are oftentimes analysts that are in private meetings with Kirby Smart. The TV crew before a game gets a chance to have more access to the coaching staff and the players than the regular media does. That's just kind of part of it. We do the same thing for high school football. The broadcast crews for these college games get long, extended private meetings, off-the-record conversations. There's a lot that helps you prepare for a game, but it also informs the stuff that you say in the weeks after that on television. You have more access to information in some cases. And even with the ability to speak privately to Kirby Smart about this, you don't really hear anybody saying, boy, I think Kirby's making the wrong choice. And I don't know why that is, but this idea that it's going to be controversial going into the SEC championship game only with fans. It's not really controversial with the media at all, and maybe it should be, but it's not. And with the players themselves, you don't get any sense that they're anything other than totally bought in on this, whether it be the praise that someone like Nolan Smith gave to Stetson Bennett or everybody else kind of toeing the company line saying the right thing. You just don't get much evidence of anybody being bothered by this except for the fans. Robert Clark says if Georgia does win the national championship, I guarantee the narrative of Kirby not managing quarterbacks will be overwhelming. I don't agree, but it will happen. That's probably true, and I think that Kirby Smart's quite aware of that there as well, that people will change their tune if Georgia doesn't win. I think you're right about that. But Smart, knowing full well of that, the fact that he continues to do this, once again, I think you have to assume that he's got a good reason for doing it. Thomas Van Santa, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. Let me go back over to DawgNation.com for a minute. We will see what other folks are saying. RX Dog says Kirby has earned the right to choose, but fans have a right to comment. Totally agree on that. You're exactly right. He says fact remains that Kirby named JT as a starter before the season, something he's not done before. JT is the highest ceiling, and a lat injury should not cost him, given the opportunity, which I think Kirby Smart is. So on your first point, I totally agree that the one thing you'll never hear me say is, hey, this is what Smart's doing, so therefore you should just accept it. That's not what you'll ever hear me say. And what I've been saying as of late is, because I'm kind of thinking of myself as a fan here for a moment, that as I try to process all this logically, I'm forced to conclude that I'm okay with Smart making this choice, even if I think it's the wrong choice. I've decided that I personally am okay with it. But the one thing you're never going to hear me say is that you have no right to do anything other than trust the coaches and fall in line. Like, this is not – like, it's not my job to carry Kirby Smart's water. It's really not. I'm not the official blah, blah, blah. There's a reason why I always say the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. If Georgia wants its own Ministry of Information megaphone mouthpiece, then it can create that for itself. But on this show, we always exist to serve the fans. It just so happens that I have kind of decided that Georgia has been good enough this year. Smart's influence on this team, I think, has created that success. Therefore, I am okay with him riding with this. I've made that choice for me. But if you want to pop in the comment section and criticize this choice, I'm not going to tell you not to. Now, the one thing you will hear me say every now and then is, and this is just true, it's that some of y'all are dangerously close to missing it. Like, this is as much fun of a Georgia season as I've ever been a part of, and some of y'all are this close to just missing it. You're so worried about, well, what's going to happen in 2022 if so-and-so doesn't get more than 2 touches per blah, blah, blah. Like, you're so worried about peripheral junior varsity level issues. Some of you are worried about the wrong stuff. But when it comes to your opinion, if you want to come in this comment section every single day, pound your fist on the table, figuratively speaking, that it ought to be JT instead of Stetson Bennett, you have every right to do that. We're not going to censor that. I am not going to censor that. I feel like I probably censor less content than anybody does. I don't care if you say bad stuff about me. I don't care if you disagree with the direction the program's going in. We are a big, wide platform that has room for a lot of broad opinions. So I totally agree with RX on this, that you have every right to disagree with the opinion. I'm just telling you for myself, I've sort of decided to make peace with it. Randy Hall says not worried about the portal now, play ball. Totally agree. Totally agree on that. Jesse S. says, I think that Georgia smokes Tennessee, which is kind of ironic given the fact that Smokey, I guess, will be on the sideline. I'm telling you right now, if Georgia smokes Tennessee, like if Georgia goes up there and wins this game 42-14, 37-6, if Georgia goes up there and wallops Tennessee, it may be on, y'all. I mean, and there's a part of me that gets nervous to even say that because everything is lining up for Georgia. The rest of the sport would appear to barely even be in the same orbit as UGA right now. Locally, everybody's kind of riding high from seeing the Braves win the World Series, and suddenly there's this whole new threshold of possibility for Georgia that people don't automatically have that assumption that, well, I guess the other shoe's going to drop. That right now the ball is coming in and looks about as big as a grapefruit, and we all get a chance to swing that, bat. Right now, it just looks very, very possible. And there is still that moment for me where I'm kind of waiting to see it still tighten up a bit, to see legit contenders emerge, to see Georgia really challenged. And as I said before, stylistically, I think that Tennessee is one of those teams that's potentially capable of doing that, even more so than teams like, say, Auburn, which I think is probably better than Tennessee. Style-wise, I think that Tennessee presents a unique challenge for UGA. If that doesn't occur, it may be on. It just may be on. Richard D says, I agree that Tennessee, despite their success, will give Georgia the closest vision of what explosive and at times high-tempo offense they will encounter from Bama in the SEC championship game. I think that Richard's right about that. Plus, if you want to think about like an Oklahoma or an Ohio State in the playoff, Tennessee's going to look a little bit like that for you there as well. That is for sure. Randy Hall also passing on some prayers and condolences for Max Cleland's family. Notable Georgian for sure. Notable Georgian. Let's see what else. Randy Hall says it's not the same Tennessee team that's playing at the beginning of the year. First of all, there's a simple reason that's true, is the Tennessee team at the beginning of the year had Joe Milton. And we got people tell us that Milton was clearly the better guy during practice. I don't know how that could have been the case, because once Hendon Hooker stepped on the field for Tennessee, he has been so obviously the quarterback that's made that team go. So it's really completely inappropriate to compare Tennessee now to Tennessee at the beginning of the season, because the quarterback is literally so different. Jared says Tennessee's like a baby Oklahoma. That's actually an interesting comparison. He says, I don't think anyone should fear them. Is the world going to end if we give up more than 13 points? No, I don't think so. If Georgia plays a close game on Saturday, like the one thing you won't hear me say on Monday is, oh, man, Georgia's got problems. I think it's entirely possible that over the course of a 12-game regular season, you would struggle every now and then. And I don't think that's necessarily indicative of something larger. So you ask a fair question. What if they do give up couple touchdowns on Saturday? I just don't think that's that big of a deal. If Georgia wins this game by 10 points on Saturday, if Georgia, has to pull it out late to make it seem more comfortable, I won't sweat that very much. Big Dog sharing a Jordan Davis Heisman Godzilla video. I'll have to check that out, Big Dog. Thanks for sharing that. Bruce Eklund says, I hear outside experts opine that JT is the best choice. I'm not seeing a lot of big names, though, attaching their name to that right now. I'm not. Mark Woodmansee says, it will be one no matter what for UGA BA. This team is extremely focused and wants to compete at the highest level. Listen, I do know that. The one thing that Georgia's not going to do is overlook Tennessee. They're not going to get caught napping going into this game. This isn't a team that's already checked out and thinking about the postseason. But even if you're locked in, you can still be challenged. You can still have things kind of fall fall in line against you time to time. Now, let's say that you had the power to play this game 10 times. Do I think that Tennessee threatens Georgia in all 10 of those? No, I don't. They need, in baseball, there's this concept of cluster luck where it's like and you got to be careful how you enunciate that. But there's this concept of, normally the number of hits in a game are dispersed relatively evenly. However, every now and then a few of those kind of cluster together closely, which leads to big innings. But that's not the kind of thing that necessarily speaks to the overall quality of a team. Sometimes you just get lucky and you have more hits consecutively than should be normally expected. If Tennessee gets a little cluster luck on Saturday, if a big play follows another big play, then all of a sudden that creates more scoring opportunities. Nicholas King said, what if Jordan Davis were to get hurt? How could that change the trajectory of the season? I think he's the player that Georgia can least afford to get injured. I just think that he's the most irreplaceable. And there are other guys that I would say are pretty close to being in that category. Nakobe Dean is an example of one of those. But there's just such a huge difference when Davis isn't in the game. No one really does that other than what Davis does. Brian McPhail says, I think that Pickens needs to show he's ready back for the draft, but I don't see him playing part of the SEC championship. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be tough to deal with if George Pickens is ready to return for an SEC championship. That'll be quite a thing. Jim McLaughlin, Nicholas King, having a little back and forth conversation here. By the way, I met Crow King 123 the other day. He came to a UGA bookstore. That was really cool. Let me also read Crow King's comment, who says, I want Jordan Davis to New York, but I couldn't blame anyone if he's talking about Will Anderson went to New York. Single-handedly saved your season Saturday, G. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, I'm in favor of defensive players getting more consideration. So if Georgia wasn't the best defense, and if Jordan Davis wasn't the avatar for that defense's success, I'd gladly argue for Will Anderson, just on the basis of theoretical concept. Defensive players should be in consideration of the Heisman Trophy each and every year. And I believe that Anderson's clearly Alabama's best player. That makes him one of the handful of best players in the country. I just don't believe he's more deserving of the Heisman Trophy than what Jordan Davis is. But theoretically, I'm right there with you that someone like Anderson ought to get consideration for that. You'll never hear me say a bad word about Will Anderson. You just won't. You just won't. All right, we've got to get ready to go. A Green Soldier says during SEC play, we've averaged 40 points per game, so I think the quarterback battle is actually good for both players. If JT takes it back, he really is the better option, and I think that's probably well said. All right, let's also remind ourselves of this. If you go to AJC.com right now, you can check out more information about some really cool souvenir opportunities available from when the Braves won the World Series. Obviously, we're still basking in the glow of that from last week, and the AJC's souvenir edition that came in newsstands, was so well received, and more chances for you to get involved in a lot of that there online at AJC.com. So you can do that. That's really cool. And other great things from the AJC there as well that you can check out, including some stuff that's suitable for framing, looks great on the wall, and just really, really terrific stuff. So make sure you check that out, AJC.com. Also, the indoor mask mandate's been lifted in Atlanta. That's kind of interesting. You can read more about that. It looks like Atlanta United heading for the MLS playoffs. That's fun. And also holiday events getting going all around the Atlanta area there, too. A lot more for you on that online at AJC.com. Big thanks as well to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews Cool Down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews can do all that for you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Make sure you find R.S. Andrews online today at rsandrews.com. All right, we'll see you back here tomorrow, 9:45 for our First and 15, 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody. I'll record a quick podcast cool down if you don't mind.